Everyone, my name's Emma. Today we are talking about the short film called Skin. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make every single day will help us create the world that we want to live in. That's what we talk about here on this channel. How can we take our power back through every decision and choice that we make? We are talking about the short film Skin, and I will be going into quite a bit of detail of what happens. So if this is a film that you want to watch, please go watch it first. I will be talking about the different scenes in the movie and what they meant and what I understand the message is. So please go and watch it first if you do not want any spoilers, because I will be talking about the scenes. It is only 20 minutes, so I do encourage you to watch it if that is something that you are choosing to do. So the film starts off with a white family shooting guns out in the country, and this white father is teaching his son how to shoot a gun. He seems to be about 8 years old. And then this family is then chronicled throughout some of their life, but the most important next scene is when they're in a grocery store and they are checking out, and a few aisles down from where they are paying for their food, there is a black man there, and he has a toy and he's playing with it, and the little kid is laughing with him, and then the white father turns around and he starts yelling at him, saying like, "You're messing with my kid," and just being really rude and aggressive and hateful. And then as the black man is walking out of the store, he says, "You know what, you are the problem." And then as he's leaving, he gets jumped by a few of that person's friends, this gang that he is part of, the white person is part of, and they beat him up. And at the end of that scene, he pours white milk all over him. And I want to talk a little bit about that because this use of milk has been used in Get Out as well. And I feel like sometimes it's not talked about enough, but milk is used as a sign of white supremacy. This is really important to talk about because that is really what the point of what is happening in this film. It's to talk about white supremacy and racism and how they are connected. But white milk represents that, well, it's white, but also milk is something that can primarily only really be digested by white people, by people who have origins from Europe. A majority of the rest of the world cannot process milk. So anytime milk is being given to people who really are any other race, it hurts them a lot more physically, and because of that, it has become a symbol of white supremacy because white people are able to process it, whereas most other races are unable to. So that is the importance of what happens, and of course it's wrong, but there's another layer to what it means when he pours a bunch of milk all over him, which is terrible. But then it also shows that both of their sons are in the cars and they are watching as this is happening. And then the few days pass by and constantly we hear the news in the background playing, but we never truly hear anything about what happened to the black man that got jumped in front of the grocery store and got really badly hurt because of these people who beat him up. And then a few days later, we see the white man and his son driving around, and then there's a car that's stopped in front of them. So the father gets out, he wants to see what's happening, and then he is also now jumped and taken, and he's taken away to another location, and he's seen to be being given injections, and it seems that he's being tattooed, and then all over his bodies there's different tattoos all over, and they are definitely a sign of white supremacy. I'm not going to specifically talk about them, but one of the people that stole him is friends with the person who got kidnapped, or the person who got jumped and who helped kidnap the person who jumped him. So then throughout those 10 days that he is kidnapped, his skin is covered with black ink. And I believe because he's so drugged that when they drop him off on the street, he can't talk because of that. But it's also possible that they like cut his tongue out. So I'm not sure. I wasn't able to find if one of those two things was true, which one was more true, but he just wasn't able to communicate. So he sees himself in a mirror or in a window, and he sees that he is now has black ink all over him. He tries to get back into his house, and he sees his wife, and his wife has a gun pointing it at him, and he is able to communicate to her that it's him. And then she realizes, oh, it's him. And then we hear a gunshot, and behind we hear a gunshot, and then he falls to the ground, and behind him is his son standing with the same gun that he taught him how to shoot on. And that is pretty much the entire film. There's a lot in there, and I want to talk about some different moving parts in it. There was a lot of controversy about this movie coming out, what it was implying, what it was trying to correlate to, and I respect everyone's opinions on that, and I'm just talking about this as what can be learned from it. There's, of course, things that shouldn't necessarily be mentioned, whether it be film or anything, but there's always something that we can learn from any piece of art, entertainment, anything that is created in this world. We can learn from it, and we can choose to see the lessons and then talk about what should be done and shouldn't be done. So that is what we're trying to do here. Just like in every other video, these are my opinions, and I just want to make that clear. So a big part of the movie is there's a child on both sides, and they're being taught what is going on in the world. And that is how a lot of children are raised, is through seeing what is going on. Most communication is nonverbal. So we can say things to children or to people, but a lot of what is taught is through actions. And actions, choices, decisions, they really do matter, and they not only affect us, but the people directly next to us and people all over the world because of choices and decisions that we get to make. And because of that, the child was making these connections, whether they were explicitly told to him or not, on both sides about what is happening and about what is reality, about what is the status of the world and what is going on in it. So when we look at what is happening in the film, it leaves this question of, well, what now? What happened to him after? What happened to that kid? How did he grow up the rest of his life? You know, it leaves a lot of questions, and I think that those questions are important, and those are jumping points to have conversations. If the reception of this movie is terrible, it shouldn't have been made, you know, let's talk about that too. Let's have these conversations on whatever side you fall on, whether it was a good film or not. Let's talk about it. Let's have this conversation, and let me know in the comments, what did you think about it? Did you see it? Did you know about it? Did you watch it? What did you think? And you know, this is meant to not be like a standstill alone. This is all that's happening. You shouldn't be looking at other resources, and that's the point. And if we don't have exposure to a lot of different thoughts and opinions and perspectives and films and lessons and all of this, we're not creating a realistic image of what's happening in the world. And then we don't know what was on the news after that. What happened legally to all of these different people? How did laws change? And, you know, he lived for a very short amount of time as a Black person, but he lived it in a way that is said to be an experience that is too often repeated. He didn't have much of a voice. He was looked at for his skin color first, and he at least experienced that, and I believe that was the point, that he was trying to be taught that lesson, like, this is what it's like. And then he was shot and killed because he taught his son to do that, and then he was in that position where it was happening to him. And it's a very powerful message that we never understand the impact of our choices and decisions until we're being faced with them. And we may never know fully what we're doing, but for a lot of the times we have a good understanding of how deciding one thing is affecting us, and that we should be careful, that we should be very aware of how we're interacting with the world, how we're teaching people about the world, how we're teaching ourselves about the world, and that this shouldn't be happening. But this was released in 2019, and after everything that's happened since then, it's more important than ever to have these conversations. And whether it's a good movie or not, that debate can happen for a long time, but the importance of it being present, being made, and starting this conversation for so many people, and people being like, this was terrible, like, why did they film it this way? It at least starts a conversation like, okay, well, you have to acknowledge race in some aspect now. And it did a good job of doing that. It started some conversation, whether it was, this was terrible, or, this showed a part of what's going on in America that isn't talked about. Either way you see it, or any of the other ways you could view what happened in the film, it at least started this conversation. It made people uncomfortable enough to speak out and say, hey, we should talk about this. So I encourage you to decide if you want to see it. If you've already seen it, what did you think about it? And during our lives, we will constantly be faced with situations, and we need to be able to take information and constantly be learning about the world constantly to understand where we do stand on different issues, and to even understand what issues are happening in the world, because a lot of the times we live in different bubbles. We get so used to the life that we live that we fail to see what's actually happening in the world. And we can't lose the perspective that the life that we understand is very different from most other people, and actually learning about other people is going to help us as individuals and as a world. So whatever you got from it, I hope that you continue the conversation of what's happening, and to stand up when you see things happening that shouldn't be, and to get uncomfortable with seeing what's going on and saying, you know what, enough is enough. This has been going on for far too long, and racism is no longer something that we can turn away from and to ignore. It's in front of us all the time, and if it's not, we need to change that too. We need to be looking at what's happening and understanding that if we created a world where people had access to the resources they needed and were treated the right way, we would all live a better life. And that's what we need to understand. And we can choose to do that every single day with the decisions that we make. So the choice is really yours, and it always has been, and you can take the power back right now. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought about the film, if you're going to watch it, if, just let me know. And I hope to see you soon. But until then, I do hope that you have an amazing day.